I went to Grande, Oregon for the first time. I didn't know the area because I'd never been to these woods before. My friend and I were there to hike and visit. We tried to find a trail she saw on the map but didn't have much luck. It was getting a little frustrating. We spent around an hour and a half in the woods but couldn't find what we were looking for. So we decided to go back to the car, especially since it was getting late and the sun was going down. We had lost our way a bit while walking near a creek and were trying to find our way out. That's when I noticed something dark about 50 feet away in the woods. I told my buddy to shut up for a sec. I needed to check something out. I took a peek through my binoculars and saw this big dark shape. Couldn't really make out any details, didn't know if it was an animal, a bush, or even a person. I wasn't really sure what I was seeing. I told her I'd go take a look, and she came along, not so much out of curiosity, but more because she didn't want to stay behind alone. As we got nearer to the dark object, I could make out what looked like a small head and long arms sticking out of it. I didn't want to freak it out and put us in danger, so I hushed my friend and told her I thought it was a person and we needed to watch out. I said we shouldn't make any sound, just keep going like we didn't notice it. As we kept going, I realized this was no person. It was some big black thing that was definitely alive but not human. Honestly, it took everything in me not to bolt right then and there out of sheer terror. I managed to stroll by it slowly, but after we were roughly 20 feet beyond it, I couldn't hold back and began sprinting. We ran for around 100 yards before stopping to look back. The creature was now upright, standing on two legs, staring right at us. It appeared to be over 7 feet tall and thin, which was surprising considering how huge it seemed when it was on the ground. It had a tiny head and really long arms that reached below its knees, and it was all covered in dark brown fur. It didn't budge. It just stood there, giving us the stare down. I was pretty freaked out, but getting this crazy urge to go check it out at a closer range. I wanted a close-up look at its face. It's like I couldn't control my curiosity. My friend was freaked out and didn't want to go back, but I insisted and she agreed. We hesitantly stepped closer, and I could make out features of this thing that I'd never seen anything like. I stared it down and it stared back with weird, bulging eyes, kind of like an alien's. It didn't twitch a muscle, just kept its focus on me and only me, not my buddy. It kind of felt like I was being hypnotized. I couldn't stop staring and felt really weird. It seemed like it was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't figure out what. Then it reached out to me with one of its huge hands that had long, weirdly bent fingers, which seemed to wiggle in a way that looked like it was motioning me to come closer. Was it asking me to hold its hand? I didn't do it. I was freaked out and clueless about the whole situation. I wanted to escape but felt like I was stuck. I was really trying to figure out what was happening, but I just couldn't. It felt like my brain was screaming that all of this wasn't real, but what I was seeing felt so real. I was super mixed up. I've never been this confused, ever. And it seriously looked like I was looking at an alien. I'm not sure how long I was there, but everything around me, trees and skies, started spinning. Everything just spun. I even pinched myself to check if I was awake. And that seemed to work for me. Then I did the only thing I could. I started running. I sprinted past my friend, shouting, "We need to leave now!" I'm not sure if she heard me. I was shouting so hard in my mind, but I couldn't tell if any sound was actually coming out. I think I was even running the wrong way because I was so confused. I was struggling to breathe, felt like I was sprinting for my life, and just thought, man, I'm gonna die. I bolted without caring where I was heading, just had to get out of there. Lucky me, I ended up at our car and hopped in quick. My friend was right on my heels, freaking out and crying, and she piled in too. We rushed home and didn't speak at all. We were just too shocked to say anything. Both of us were freaking out and crying. It was super scary. It's literally the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. Even now, I'm not really sure what went down that day. I reckon I saw an alien or some creature that didn't look like it was from here. I think it wanted to get a message across to me, though I have no idea what. I can't get the image of that thing's face out of my head. I'm super excited even while writing this. I'm really happy I found you, Jonathan, and this group. You guys have given me a lot of hope. I studied biology in college because I wanted to go to med school. I applied to a bunch of places and was waiting to see if any would accept me. People kept saying it's common to get rejected the first time. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get a job related to biology. This could make my application stronger for the next time. I had done a few internships while I was still studying, and I figured out that I really liked working in a lab. I started working at a biolab near Phoenix, mostly doing cleaning and simple tasks, even though they had advertised a different kind of work. After about 8 months, I advanced in my job from mopping floors to having a decent role in my area. Finally, I ended up researching the Zika virus, especially how it affects pregnant mice in our lab. I'll keep it simple for those who are easily grossed out. We took really good care of our lab mice, all right? We ended the lives of any affected baby mice even before they were born, so they didn't suffer at all. Although it wasn't perfect, it was the best method to research the virus, but that's beside the point. That's not why I'm telling my story. There was something else in the lab. Something that many of us working there didn't know about. I had no idea about its existence until the day it almost got away. I had stayed up late one night dissecting a mouse. I understand it sounds harsh, but that's the only way to learn about them. The mouse was already dead. They put it down humanely. I wasn't tormenting it or anything. Plus, we were allowed to stay late in the lab if we had to. I wasn't there on the sly. The lights were on in my spot, so it was clear I was there. It was almost 1 a.m, and I was just about to finish packing up and turn everything off at my desk when I heard the alarm. At first, I thought it was fire alarm, but I quickly figured out it was a contamination breach. The doors closed and locked themselves. I couldn't do anything until they got the contamination under control. I sat back down and checked my phone. I texted my boss to see if she knew what was happening or how long I'd be stuck in the biolab. But I didn't get a reply. Good thing there was a sink with clean water and a small fridge here. It wasn't perfect, but it'd do if I was trapped for a bit. I didn't hear anyone for around 45 minutes. Then I heard some noise from the hallway, so I knocked on the door to let them know I was in here. Luckily, I managed to get one of them to chat with me. They didn't tell me the details, but made it clear I was safe and just needed to stay put while they fixed the issue. I was scared it might be a virus or a chemical leak. I didn't want to catch any killer bug they might be growing in there, or even worse, end up with cancer in a few years. You know, the more I thought about it, the more freaked out I became. So, I decided to gear up with a Tyvek suit and a gas mask. I mean, it was all I had in the lab, but it felt better than nothing. I must have waited in that suit for about an hour or two before anything big really happened. Suddenly I heard gunshots. It sounded like a machine gun. If you haven't heard gunshots inside a building, trust me, it's super loud. Honestly, I'm shocked the windows didn't break. It was really loud. Sounded like people were running around in the halls, but I wasn't sure because gunshots were going off. It was as if everything else became kind of quiet after that. I removed my mask. Clearly, there was no virus or chemical issue here. I looked at the door one more time. It was still shut tight. Then it was silent again for maybe half an hour. I'm not too sure. I sat back down in my chair, hoping I'd maybe get out before it was morning. Then I heard some footsteps outside the door. I was hoping someone was finally there to let me out, so I went to the door. Just to clarify, there are no windows in the lab where I was stuck. The only window was a thin rectangular one on the door that let me see into the hallway. I went up to the window thinking I'd see someone in protective gear or maybe a cop or security guard, but what I saw wasn't that. I saw 2 yellowish eyes peeping at me. They were as high as a tall man's eyes would be, but it wasn't a man. The creature had a furry, gray, dog-like face. The fur was longer around its face and neck, but I couldn't see much past the door. I can say it looked like a wolf, but as tall as a person. It stared right at me and I heard the door handle jiggling. It was trying to get in. Man, I freaked out. I yanked the fire alarm. It kind of freaked out the beast for a bit, but I ended up triggering the water sprinklers. So now I'm stuck in this lab, right? Water's gushing out from everywhere, and there's this wolf-like thing roaming around in the corridors. And over all this noise, I can still hear gunshots. Then there was quiet. We were stuck in the building for another hour before they let us go home. No explanations given. My boss eventually called and said it was just a messed up training exercise. I could tell she was lying, and I reckon she realized I knew. But we both knew she wasn't going to tell me the truth. So what I know is they had something in the lab which they shouldn't. It escaped. And probably whoever came to handle the matter most likely killed it. I was nearing the end of my nightly run, heading back to my car. I usually choose to run in the nearby state park instead of the street. There have been too many accidents involving pedestrians in my neighborhood, so running on the roads doesn't seem safe after dark. Though now, after what happened at the park, I'm not so sure it's safe to run there either. I usually don't go jogging at night, but I worked late today. I have to admit the park is kind of far and maybe not the safest place to go at night. I haven't seen any strange people there after dark, but there are a lot of animals around. I mean, like bears, cougars, wolves, and moose. I was careful, you know. I brought bear spray and always had music playing on my phone when I went out at night. I figured most critters would keep their distance if they heard noise. I guess I was about 2 miles away from my car when I decided to take a break. I took out some water from my bag and chose to take a quick walk. It was sunset, but there was still some light. I wasn't freaking out just yet, but I knew I needed to hurry up if I didn't want to be stuck there after dark. Suddenly, I saw an orange light shining from behind me. It felt as if the sun suddenly popped up. I was sure nothing could be that bright. Definitely not a flashlight or car lights. It was as bright as the sun itself. The forest in front of me suddenly lit up in this orange light. I quickly turned around to see where the light was coming from, and it was gone just as fast as it showed up. But there was a deer behind me in the darkness. As soon as I turned around, I got a whiff of this horrible smell, like something dead and rotting. It was so strong that I almost fell to my knees. And like I mentioned, it wasn't there before. I instantly knew it was coming from the deer. The animal was really skinny, and you could see its ribs through the skin. I was shocked it could even stand, it was so heavy. It must be ill or have an infected wound or something because it stunk bad. Even though it looked sick, it had antlers that were double its body width. I kind of felt sorry for it, thinking it's probably really old and sick. But there was something else about it too. I wasn't sure why, but I felt something was off. When I tried to scare the deer away, it just wouldn't move. I had a bit to walk before I reached my car, and I wasn't keen on turning my back to it. But after failing to make it move again, I finally decided to head back to my car. The moment I looked away, the sky lit up with orange light again. When I turned back, the deer hadn't moved an inch. Somehow I knew it was connected to this weird light and the awful smell of death. Its eyes were totally blank. "What the heck are you?" I asked. Then that orange light came back, bright as the sun, right behind the deer. The whole forest was suddenly all lit up as if it was day. A deer looked at me, lifting its head, and its antlers appeared to be melting. They turned all soft and started dripping right into the ground. But that's not all. The creature's fur started to fall off, showing its rotting skin and muscles. Some parts even showed bone. Its face skin began to roll down its neck, as if someone had burnt it. The whole skull of the creature was visible, and its eyes were gone. Its mouth opened wide, and the bottom jaw just kind of dropped, leaving its tongue hanging in front. It was totally freaky. I was so scared. I couldn't stop shaking, making it hard for me to reach my bear spray. I wasn't even sure if the spray would work on it, but it was the only thing I had. I stepped back a bit, and then the orange light stopped. It got dark in the forest, and the thing in front of me was a deer again. I asked it what it was, and it showed me. It revealed its true self. I was thinking, why is it after me? But I was too scared to ask. I was sure it wasn't anything good, so I just turned around and bolted. I don't think I've ever sprinted like that before. The creature didn't come after me, though, and I didn't see that weird orange light in the sky again. I kind of feel like that beast was just messing with me. I mean, if it could do all that, it could have easily taken me out, right? I'm not sure why it let me go. But one thing's for sure. I'm avoiding the woods like the plague when it's dark out. Someone's trying to keep Wisconsin a secret. I know this cause I was there from day one, saw it all before they figured out what they didn't want us to see. Back in the late 2010s, a nuclear leak spilled into the Mississippi River. They called in emergency services right away to form a barrier around the affected part of the river. I was one of those people on the front line. Their goal was to keep people from freaking out. They said the leak was under control early on and that there wasn't any radiation in the ground or air. They tried to make it seem like it was safe, which we all found weird, especially those of us on the outside looking in. It's weird they only started checking the water after everything happened. They had handheld devices to test radiation and different tools to put in the water. They were dressed way more carefully than us, which was pretty scary. We were wearing our usual gear, trying to get people to clear off the area. Meanwhile, these guys in hazmat suits were just behind us. It wasn't exactly comforting, but it sure made people steer clear of the emergency dividers. In a couple of hours, they started fishing stuff out of the river. They started fishing and catching all sorts of fish. We weren't sure why, and we didn't bother to ask. Every time they did something different, we got nervous all over again. After they were done testing and fishing, they began to leave us alone. The news kept saying the same stuff. They claimed there's no harmful radiation and nothing to worry about. We found it odd when they closed off a large portion of the Mississippi to fishermen, but we all assumed it was just a safety step, not a reaction to something. I think they might be letting them back in now, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they thought it was too late. Or maybe they just didn't care about the bad stuff being said because they're so used to hiding it. The main problem wasn't really the fish, it was the people. The day's first responders all began to feel unwell. At first, nobody noticed. It only hit us when one of our pals had to quit work. That's when we realized something was wrong. We were all becoming sickly. We weren't sure if it was because of exposure, just bad luck, or something strange in Wisconsin's air, but we really wanted to figure it out. So we began going back to the Mississippi secretly. Then we started looking at the animals living there. The reactor had been torn down for several months at that point. We thought there wouldn't be any more danger for folks like us. We discovered awful stuff in that water, though. Not a lot, but still. Looks like animals handle nuclear radiation better than us humans. Still, there were changes, weird developments. We did what we could and tried to get help from the Fish and Game Department. They rejected us. Not only that, they reported us too. Soon enough, cops were at our doorstep, handing out all the fines and tickets they could manage. They warned us things would only get worse if we tried again. So we decided to go back. This time we tracked the river until it was safe to sneak onto the old nuclear plant's property. We were really curious to see the reactor. We needed to check if it was still there, or if it had been taken out or wrecked. Even if we couldn't help ourselves, at least we knew the same thing wouldn't happen again. We just wanted to know if our friends and family were okay. We didn't reach the reactor. Looking back, it's obvious we wouldn't have made it there. They likely had people watching us everywhere in that factory. But we still saw stuff. Inside the factory, they had tents that looked like hospital areas. You know, like emergency medical stations. We could tell immediately they were out of place. There's never been any injuries reported inside the plant, not in our incident or any other, but it was obvious something had gone down. The beds had marks on them. There were medical stuff like bandages and IV fluids thrown around everywhere. They were definitely trying to fix someone, or even something up in there. Something had gotten wounded. We started to wonder, could there be other freaky mutations out there? Maybe there are weird things still living in the plant, right? After seeing the fish, it doesn't seem too outlandish. But we didn't find out. Cops came out of nowhere and hauled us out. When we got back to the cop shop, there were some guys in suits telling everyone what to do. We figured they were from the FBI, but we didn't actually check. We thought we might end up in jail, even thought about prison. But all they did was give us another warning, which was unexpected. They sent us back. We are gradually getting sick and silenced. As more of us get unwell, it appears as if we're just making stuff up. We've been ignored and pushed off as much as possible. Many can't wrap their heads around the idea that a nuclear plant shut down in the 80s could still be polluting the environment. Yet they won't go there. In fact, nobody wants to or should. It's not safe there, not in the Mississippi River and certainly not in Wisconsin. If the truth ever had a shot at coming out, I could probably let it go. I might not feel so guilty constantly. Or this need I have to tell a story no one believes in. Too bad, there's just no way. No one's ever going to find out the truth. It'll die with me. I've always found the whole ghost and paranormal stuff pretty silly most of my life. But sometimes, really weird and unexplainable things do happen. This happened to me. Right after I graduated college, I landed a great job in Baltimore. Maryland's actually pretty cool, despite all the bad stuff people say about it. I got a job at a marketing company, so I was making good money. Still, all I had saved up could only get me a low-end apartment. I don't mean it was terrible, though. The neighborhood was quite decent, really. The place was tiny, really old, and not maintained well. The lift was just there for show, and my landlord didn't bother about fixing my appliances that were half broken, but hey, it was my own place, and I was proud of it. Plus, having a few buddies around in the city meant I didn't feel too alone. Basically, everything started off perfectly as I had planned, but then strange things began to happen. Just a few weeks after I moved in, I found out the heating and air conditioning wasn't working at all. I mean, completely out of order. My apartment is always cold, even in summer. It annoys me because I can't stand the cold. Plus, it's frustrating because my landlord keeps saying there's nothing wrong and everything's current. The real problem was that I started losing my stuff. My books, even the one I was reading and left on my bed, just vanished. Then other things began disappearing too. Mail, keys. They'd be missing for a few days and then pop up in random places around the house. I thought I was going crazy. This went on for some time, and I tried my best to just ignore it until I couldn't anymore. I hit my breaking point when it woke me up one night. It was dead in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. or something, when I woke up to giggling sounds in my room. At first, I wasn't really sure if I was actually hearing it, thinking maybe it was part of my dream that kind of seeped into reality as I was waking up. Then I saw stuff that totally creeped me out. I looked at the door leading to the hallway and saw a small, shadowy figure just staring at me. I wasn't having any sleep paralysis or anything like that. I could move, but the fact that I could see this while being perfectly fine made it even more frightening. There was this blurry figure, right? It didn't move, just stood there staring at me with bright eyes. I went to grab my phone to call for help, because it was kind of spooky. But when I looked back, the figure was gone. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I did something I felt a bit ashamed of. I looked up a psychic on the internet. Turns out, there's way more of them online than you'd expect. At first, I thought, there's no way that's a profitable business. But then it hit me. If I'm hitting them up, others probably are too. Man, I was seriously getting creeped out. I stopped seeing that shape, but I kept waking up in the night. Things kept going missing. My place stayed cold, and I always felt someone was watching me, even at my own crib. So I finally gave in to this crazy idea and paid the medium a few $100s to come clean my flat. The whole thing was really strange. I mean, you have to give it to these mediums. They sure know how to sell it. She had me totally believing my flat was haunted, and even though I wasn't totally on board, I figured this was my last shot and it was better to be safe than sorry. The real clincher was when she mentioned she felt something there. I had to know what. She said it was innocent, maybe even a ghost child. That actually made sense to me. Considering the small shadow I kept seeing, weird giggling sounds, and certain things disappearing, it all started to make sense. This situation was crazy, but somehow it made sense. I really can't explain what this woman did, but it worked. She burned some stuff and said some stuff. That's about it. Everything went back to normal, and nothing like that has happened to me again. I'm grateful, you know? I still don't know if I buy into the whole psychic and supernatural stuff, but whatever she did, it worked. And I gotta say, I appreciated having less stress. Not many people outside Montana know how beautiful Flathead Lake is. Unless you're really into fishing, you probably wouldn't know about our lake. But calling it little isn't right. The size of Flathead Lake is actually quite huge. I think it's about 200 square miles, but don't quote me on that. Feel free to fact-check it. Actually, you can check any part of this story if you want. I really hope I'm wrong. I wish I knew what went down at Flathead Lake. Anything's better than my current thoughts. I was out there just kayaking. You shouldn't do it alone, especially if it's your first time. I've done kayaking many times, like over 12 times. I've never really pushed myself to cover the full 25 miles of Flathead. I've been to the lake loads of times. I've hiked around it, fished from the side, and even paddled around in a kayak or canoe. I even like to bring dates here. People generally enjoy spending time by the water, especially during sunset, but I guess I won't be inviting anyone to Flathead soon again. Oh, I almost forgot how important that sunset view is. I planned my day so that I'd wrap up my trip at sunset. I thought it'd be great to chill out at the end and see the sky shift hues. After that, I'd get ready to go home. My buddy's gonna meet me with a trailer to haul my kayak. I was late. As the day ended, the lake began to clear out. Tourists headed home. Fishermen took a break for food before coming back to fish at night. I think it was the first time I was really alone on Flathead, at least that I can remember, probably because of what happened later. I was about 3/4 of the way along my usual path when I noticed something popping up from the water. It looked like long, thin branches sticking up from the ground. You know, plants can come off in the lake at any moment. Trees can fall in, then pop up again later when they're lighter and decayed. But this was different somehow. The branches sticking out reminded me of an elk's antlers, just like the one my dad used to have above our fireplace. It made me feel nostalgic, and I felt like I had to check it out. I mean, it was obvious those horns or branches or whatever they were didn't belong there. I thought I'd hit a log, move it out of the way, and keep on with my night at Flathead. But the branches didn't give way, like they were floating or something. They didn't seem like rotten wood and were coated with something slick and wet. It felt like touching a fish. You know, small scales packed so close they seemed smooth. Everything about it seemed off. It was so puzzling I ended up telling myself I had to figure it out. I reached out and shook the branches. Something shifted in the water. A wave rolled against my kayak. The branches swiveled almost like they were watching me. They kind of lifted up about 3 inches out of the water. I figured maybe I'd bumped it or something. So I bent over the side to check it out. Whatever was under the water wasn't a tree. I believe it was a fish. It seemed like one. I've been fishing a lot in Flathead, so I can usually tell what's there. This particular one looked like a sturgeon. There's this huge, scary sturgeon. It's about 20 feet long. Seriously, it's big enough to freak anyone out. I could see its head. I saw the huge antlers reach all the way back to its head. If I could have, I would have jumped from my kayak to the shore. I shouted and flapped around. I almost flipped over, I guess. The fish yanked away from my kayak and zoomed back under. The antlers that were above the water bumped into my boat as they vanished. I got out of there real fast. I told my buddy we should call the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department, but they brushed us off. We then tried going higher up to the National Park Service. When they showed up, all they did was ask if I'd been drinking while boating that day. I showed them the scratches on my kayak that the antlers caused. They told me not to call again or they'll get me arrested. Can they even do that? What exactly did I do wrong? I didn't understand it then, and I still don't. What should I do? After that, I asked a few folks around here. I'm not the only one who's spotted something strange in that lake. There are stories about weird things being seen there for centuries. Do you think that fish I saw could have been that old? I didn't think anything like that could happen. I actually felt it with my own hands. I mean, I really touched it, right? It's something I can't ignore. You know, it's all I go on about these days. My buddies, including the one who was with me then, are getting worn out and worried about me. I've become that guy. You know, the one who's always spinning tales at the pub that you think are made up. I mean, you don't really trust what I say, right?